It's especially difficult to understand the psychological process, the interior of one whose madness drove him to commit an atrocious act. And yet the ingenuity and the creativity of these filmmakers and of the artists who have put this film together has managed to do something truly exceptional. There's a remarkable performance tonight in this film tonight. And it's truly a pleasure to welcome to the stage the director of this remarkable work, Jarrett Schaefer.
Thanks, everyone. Before we begin, I have to say the thanks to John Block and Peace Arch for taking a chance on me in this film.
Okay.
And I'd like to introduce Mr. Jarrett Leto. Why did I feel compelled to make the film? And I suppose you really don't know the reasons why you're compelled to do something. It's a search for answers. So when you hear about this, most people hear about the event and just think that there's a guy who's crazy, and not part of the human race. But I guess there's two impulses. If something tragic happens, you either don't want to think about it or don't want to know about it, or you want to know everything you can. And the more I read, and the more I found out about what took place in these 3 days, there was a lot of meaning and a lot of answers to be happening in several of the tiny moments. And I think when something like this happens, you crave meaning and you crave answers. And that was the writing process. When you're making a film, you have to announce things in trade publications and things, and we didn't want the family to read it, to find out about it that way. So we made it clear what our intentions were and why, but there's no dialogue.
As soon as I read Jarrett's script, it was clear that he had a strong indication and idea of what he wanted out of this project. And immediately we both started on a very almost religious process of exploration and discovery and education. And obviously it was a very physical role, but that was really only a part of it. It was an extremely challenging and interesting and horrifying and exhilarating and really depressing journey to take. But I had a really strong partner in Jarrett, and we started this incredible journey together where we followed the footsteps and we traveled and we learned and we read and discovered and tried to identify a human being rather than a monster, and to see inside another person's soul, albeit a very sick and disturbed one. So it was a very physically challenging transformation, and I could talk about that for days, but I just did what I thought I needed to do to try and do a good job for Jarrett and everybody. She asked how much weight that I gained. 3-4 pounds, something. I gained a lot of weight. I'm 70 pounds lighter than I am now, than I was in the film. But the interesting thing about gaining the weight is that it changed everything about who I was. It changed how I walked. It changed how I talked. It changed how people treated me, how they looked at me. It changed how I laughed. And it really gave me an indication that I couldn't have gotten if I didn't go the distance with that. But, maybe I didn't need to gain as much as I did. Jarrett certainly encouraged me to get as fat as humanly possible. But I think he was punishing me. There's something rewarding about fasting and challenging yourself when you lose weight And I don't know if anybody out there has fasted before, but it's often a spiritual process for people, and I found that to be true when I was making Requiem for a Dream. And that put me in a place of constant starvation. And for this film, it was quite the opposite. I think that the physicality of the role, and we talked about this, Jarrett and I did at the very first time that we sat down and met and fell in love. We talked about how the physical aspect meant so much and really said so much about who and what Mark was. But it certainly was an unforgettable experience, and like I said before, that was only one aspect of the journey, and he was a very complex individual, and as I got to know Mark David Chapman, I discovered a lot about him, and underneath the caricature, I suppose, underneath the idea of the monster was a multifaceted human being, albeit a sick, disturbed individual, still an individual, and it was a real distinct, disturbing honor to be able to dive into the face of the failure of humanity with this character.
I do remember when my friend Clinton Beer, who's thanked in the special thanks, introduced me to John Lennon and then told me how he died, and then a split second later said that he was going to be there in 2001 when this person was eligible for parole to shoot him. Just that simple.
What do you learn about Mark Chapman during this process? You didn't already know. What do you learn about that character, that person? What new information?
Countless things. I think one of the most striking is his inability to communicate, which is the same problem that Holden Caulfield has. The answers are all right there. The answers that Mark needs are all in The Catcher in the Rye and in the music of John Lennon. They're right in front of him. They're his texts, and he still can't see it.
Tell us about the depicting John Lennon in the movie. How you cast it and how you shadow.
Sure. There's a lot of John Lennon lookalikes out there, and I looked at a bunch of them, but I was going, feel alike is what you want, and most of the people who make a living looking like John and playing his music portray him in a way where he, 6 inches above the ground. They portray him as a legend, but I was more interested in portraying him as, he had these cynical one-liners, and he's famous for the chip on his shoulder and saying exactly what he means. And the actor who portrays him has exactly that, and he was the only one.